Hello, everybody. It is me, editorial director at Digital Eclipse, Chris Kohler. Here, we are very, very excited. This is a very special live stream for us. Thank you all for being here with us today. It is the first ever live streaming gameplay of the Making of Karateka. The Making of Karateka is the first entry in our Gold Master series that we're doing here at Digital Eclipse, and that is an independently published, self-funded, essentially, series of interactive documentary-style video game releases that is celebrating amazing and legendary and important games, directors, studios, franchises, and really just telling the stories of video game history past. And again, we're very excited to be putting this out there. It's going to be out tomorrow, Karateka Tuesday, August 29th, and it's going to be available for Steam, Epic, and GOG on PC stores. It's going to be available on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series S, Pipe X. Basically all platforms. With me here in the studio today is our producer, Drew Scanlon.
Hello.
Hi, Drew.
Great
How's
to
it
be
going?
here. Yes, it's very exciting that this game is finally coming out.
Finally coming out. Finally coming out. I mean, when I started here at Digital Eclipse, and we started right around the same time, in July of 2020, and it was the first project that I was put on, and it was a much sort of smaller version of what this would eventually be, and we just looked at what we were doing with it, and this had been in the works basically since 2015, basically since Digital Eclipse had relaunched as a brand, and the concept was, let's do something in-house, let's work with Jordan Mechner on his directorial debut title that he released back in 1984 before Prince of Persia. And let's do what we really believe should be done to show off like one single video game. Like, how can we make essentially like a collection of one game, right? And that means going extremely deeply into the making of, the behind the scenes, and everything, all the context around this legendary game. And what we have now for the first entry in the Gold Master series is not, we've blown past the concept of the retro collection. This is really, it's all about the story of the making of the game. It's a documentary. And if you're a big fan of Karateka, then you're going to be really excited, I think, to jump in and see what we've done here. If you've never heard of Karateka before, great, because this is not constructed for the Karateka fan, the pre-existing Karateka fan. This assumes that you've never heard of this and that you want to go on this journey with us and learn about this amazing story in video game history and about this game, Jordan Mechner's Karateka, that literally, it is not overstating the case at all to say that this inspired a generation of game designers. This game, Jordan made so mane innovations in video gaming just in this one game. And in terms of the cinematic approach, cut scenes, camera work, using rotoscoping for the animation, in terms of having a beautiful, gorgeous soundtrack in which every character, every emotion, had its own little theme. And really, and exceeding the boundaries of what the Apple II computer could do. The Apple II computer did not have sound hardware. The Apple II computer did not have color graphics hardware. So when you're playing an Apple II game and there's color graphics on the screen, that is essentially, like a workaround, basically, because it didn't actually have color graphics output. And the things that Apple II programmers had to do to get their masterpieces on the screen were sort of mind-boggling. And that just makes Jordan's achievements with Karateka something very special, and something really wonderful for us to look back on in the Making of Karateka. And importantly, Jordan was a huge pack rat who saved everything. What you'll find out as you're playing through the Making of Karateka is that Jordan kept a diary, a journal, starting in his freshman year of college at Yale University, which you may have heard of. And every day he wrote down what he did that day. And every day, he was writing down that he was basically skipping all of his classes at Yale so he could sit in his dorm room and make video games, because that was really the passion that he had. He wanted to break into the gaming industry. He knew that he could do something equivalent to or better than what was on the shelves, even at 17 years old. And he's like, I really want to do this. And so this is the story of how a teenager with an Apple II was able to create in his dorm room what ended up being one of the most influential games of all time. And we do it in the Making of Karateka, not by simply giving you games to play and saying, okay, go play them, but by putting everything into this contextual, historical experience that you're going to get to go through in a chronological way. And look, if you just want to play Karateka, you could just jump in and play Karateka, no problem. We will make that very easy for you. But if you want to learn about the story, we've made that very easy for you as well, because everything is laid out chronologically, and there's interactive elements along the way. So you're constantly engaged as you're going through. You're not just sort of being fed it, this story, in a linear way. And it really also enables you to sort of jump around, look at what you want to look at, spend the time you want on the things that interest you the most. And that's why, this concept of this interactive documentary, that's why we believe here at Digital Eclipse that the best way to tell the stories of the history of video games is to do it through a video game, in an interactive way. That's the best way to tell this story, and that's what the Making of Karateka is the proof of concept of.
Yeah, indeed, and I think it's something that we really want to explore more in the Gold Masters series. So this is kind of the proof of concept of that whole lineage of products too.
Yes, and this is entry number 1 in the Gold Master series, and we are 100% devoted to producing the next few entries in the Gold Master series as well in what should hopefully be a pretty reasonable amount of time. So we are so grateful that you are here to be a part of the first entry, and we hope that this can just keep going and going and build its own history. And so here we are. Let's do it. Let's do the first ever live stream of the Making of Karateka, and press A to start.
I'm over here in the chat on Twitch. If anyone has any questions, I can relay them to Chris.
Yep, I am happy to hear your questions. So here we are in, again, the main menu, and the main menu does not start us off with a list of games. It starts us off on Chapter 1, and it starts us off with a game called Death Bounce. And so Death Bounce is an unpublished, for now, game by Jordan Mechner. And it was a arcade-style space shooter, sort of in the vein of Asteroids. And this was what Jordan thought was going to be his ticket. This was going to be the big game that he was going to publish and break him in to the video game industry. But it got rejected by the publisher Broderbund, and he had to deal with that rejection. And in hindsight, Jordan realized that going through that whole process of doing something that he felt was going to be marketable, that he felt was going to be what people wanted, and being rejected was what led him then, for his next project, to create something that was so far out of the ordinary, that was absolutely not what anybody else was doing, and then it turns out really advanced the medium of the video game, a couple of years essentially in one jump, because it was so innovative on so many different levels, and because he was no longer looking at other video games for inspiration. He was looking outside of games, and he was looking at film primarily, and saying, how could I put a cinematic experience on the screen? Other games had characters, other games had stories, other games had the sense, trying to show something of a movie-like presentation in some cutscenes. But Jordan really wanted, from start to finish, to produce something on the screen that felt like a little movie. And again, Prince of Persia became extremely popular, but maybe you haven't heard of Karateka. Maybe you haven't heard of Karateka, even if you're a person who reads a lot about video game history, because only certain stories of video game history tend to get told. And Karateka was released in 1984 on a personal computer. And often what you hear about the American video game industry at that time is, well, there was Atari, then there was a crash, and then nothing happened. And then in 1985, Nintendo rode in on a white horse and saved video games. And that story is sort of kind of true, for the American game console business, but it's not true all over the world, and Karateka was a worldwide success. And it's not true about personal computers, because there was amazing stuff happening on personal computers, including, I brought a prop, including Karateka by Jordan. It's actually it's Mike Micah's copy, or studio president's copy, that I stole out of his office. I hope he doesn't notice. And
there's a lot in there.
There's a lot. There's a lot. Exactly. You can take any one thing out of there. Oh no, he knows. Oh, he knows. He would know. So here we are in the Death Bounce timeline, and again, as I said, like, we do not start this off with, oh well, you obviously know what Karateka is. Here's some design documents. We actually literally start this off. This is the first of many video featurettes. There's over an hour of video with lots of interviews with Jordan, interviews with his father Francis Mechner, who was actually a very important part of this story. Interviews with people who worked on Karateka, but then also interviews with people who were inspired by Karateka. And that's actually, those are the people who primarily we see in this opening video. This is like a little behind the scenes thing of, like, this video, we don't talk about, we don't see Jordan in this introductory video. We don't get into the behind the scenes. It's literally all the surface level of, like, what it was like what it was like when Karateka just appeared on the shelf at that period of time, and what kind of an impact it has. I don't want to go through the whole entire video right now, but let's sit and watch, you know, the first few minutes of this, like, as it appears.
So, this is a MediaMate, and it contains a bunch of 5 1/4 inch discs. There's a lot of classics in here, including Wolfenstein and Beyond Castle Wolfenstein, which inspired us later. And just behind that is the game, Karateka. Love it. It's so good.
I remember seeing Karateka and wanting it, and then not have enough money to buy it. But I think I saved up some money, and I eventually went back and got it. I was sold on the box artwork alone. Kind of told a story. I remember the illustration was really well done, and again, just kind of told a story of what that game was. And yeah, eventually I picked it up and started playing it.
When I first loaded it up, what I expected was something down the lines of Karate Champ or similar head-to-head beat-em-ups. Instead, what I got was a cinematic experience. That's what blew my mind, right? The fact that it started with, you know, a text crawl, right out of, which to my mind, that was right out of Star Wars, right? That cinematic experience is the thing that was just amazing, right? It was the most movie-like experience I'd ever had in a video game at that point.
It really felt like, you know, you're a karate hero in a movie. You know, that's fantastic. All the other things feel like bleeps and bloops, and this is like, you know, movie making. It was amazing.
Yeah, I was just very impressed.
So it's really important, Drew, to get that sense from people who played it at the time. Like, how impactful was it at the time? Because that starts to build that contextual awareness that you kind of need to understand, like, why this game was so important in the first place. Because look, today, every video game is a cinematic movie-like experience, right?
Yeah.
So to imagine a time in which that was simply not the case, in which, you know, you put this disc into your Apple II, you know, whether you bought it, like John Tobias, co-creator of Mortal Kombat, or whether you simply pirated it from someone like Tom Hall, co-founder of id Software.
Oh, it didn't come with like a Sharpie written
with the game's title spelled wrong? No, it really didn't. Actually, you know, Jordan has told me that people have come up to, like, big people in the video game industry have come up to him and, like, handed him $20 at, like, GDC or whatever, and they're like, I'm so sorry, I pirated Karateka. But I mean, it's, yeah, like, you know, at the time there was rampant, you know, piracy of computer games, so a lot of people who were, you know, very impacted by this game didn't actually buy it. But yeah, you know, so whether to hear from guys like that who, you know, were directly inspired by it. You know, John Tobias talks later on in one of the video segments about, you know, what directly inspired Mortal Kombat, you know, from Karateka. And if you know, Mortal Kombat was all about, you know, Jordan Mechner used rotoscoping, while, you know, Mortal Kombat, you know, took it to the next level and actually digitized photographs. You know, it wasn't motion capture yet, but it was like the next step essentially in that process of bringing real life into the animation of video games. And he, you know, and so again, like things like Mortal Kombat, Prince of Persia, id Software, Wolfenstein are a little bit more well known today. And so to say, hey, these guys, they were directly inspired by this, I think it really lends it that credibility.
Yeah, completely. I mean, it's someone who was not around for when Karateka came out, and I consequently do not have that kind of impact on my personal life. To hear these guys, titans of the video game industry, like being shocked and surprised and wowed by something, it immediately makes me want to see what that is about.
Yeah, and not just saying like, oh yeah, Karateka, yeah, I remember that game. No. Like saying like, no, you don't understand. This was the game.
Yeah.
This was the game. And so after that video, we jump in and we take a big step back essentially and literally go back to Jordan Mechner, child prodigy, who was, we talk about here the fascinating things that I, started finding when I started researching this game. It's like he's writing articles about mathematics and programming in computing magazines when he was 13. He gets his Apple II. He saves up all his money to get an Apple II, and he starts programming games. And there he is. We have these amazing photos. Jordan was very helpful in like digging up family photos and stuff like that. And there's the pile of his cassette tapes actually back there in the window. This is Jordan at like 14. I think he said it ran in the family that everybody in his family was like very like small as like as early teenagers and stuff like that. Just very short, childish, cherubic appearance. We get into. I want to show you a little bit of this. I don't just want to sit here and just watch videos with you guys because I need you to buy this game and B, I mean, you're going to be able to do this on your own time. But let's take a look at these. There's this wonderful, lengthy interview that so much of this is based around, and it's Jordan Mechner and his father, Francis Mechner, and they're sitting at the family piano in their apartment in New York City. Francis composed the soundtrack to Karateka, and in one of the videos you'll hear some live performances by him of the Karateka themes. He also, as we will learn a little bit later, participated in the rotoscoping process because Jordan needed someone an adult height basically to do some fill-in moves that his karate instructor did not do for the rotoscoping process, and that ended up being Francis Mechner. And so when you see the classic run animation in Karateka, that is directly taken from Super 8 film footage of Francis Mechner running around in the woods outside their house in upstate New York. And so we're so grateful to have Francis, in all these video segments. He's a fascinating guy. You can go look him up and learn a lot about him, but let's just take a look a little bit here. There it is. There's Francis. There's the karate guy.
You actually got started when you kept going to the local arcade and you kept borrowing quarters to put in the arcade machine to do, what was it? Not Star Wars.
Space Invaders?
No.
Asteroids?
Asteroids. Yeah. You were completely addicted to asteroids. Every day you couldn't wait to go to the arcade to put some more quarters in that machine. To play asteroids.
And that was 1980, so by then I was already in high school. It's pretty embarrassing if I was borrowing quarters from you.
From everybody. Yeah.
I don't want to do too much more of this, but it's just what I love about this video in particular, and really that opening where we see Francis and Jordan for the first time, is that this is Jordan Mechner, like one of the absolute like top echelon, respected game designers of all time, but here he's sitting with his dad, who is telling these like slightly embarrassing stories about his childhood, and it just adds this wonderful kind of human element to this story that I'm so glad that we're able to sort of convey like in this game.
Yeah, and it just like a little bit of behind the scenes here. That footage, I'm so glad that we got the footage when we did, because as you alluded to, Chris, this has been in development for a while and undergone a few different forms, this product, and that footage is from COVID. Like that was lockdown.
Prior to.
Yeah, that was a lockdown.
No, it wasn't. No,
it wasn't.
No, that footage was from like before COVID.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well,
We had it for a long time.
okay. Well, it's the bottom line. It's
Yeah,
not us. Like
it's no.
They actually Francis and Jordan agreed to just have I think one of their family members
Yep.
film it for us.
Yep.
And just like here, if you can use this, have at it. And it's like gold. Like the fact that those two are sitting down next to each other. There's just so much amazing footage in here that
Yeah.
I can't believe that. We have, because it's unlike anything else really that I've ever seen.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's really, really great. Hey, so this is an interactive documentary, and so now we get to our first playable experience. And so I talked about Death Bounce. Well, prior to Death Bounce, Jordan, the first thing he was going to do was he was going to just straight up create a clone of Asteroids, because this is what a lot of developers were doing at this time. There was no official version of Atari's Asteroids for the Apple II, and games like, basically, if you look at the early history of Apple II software publishers, like in Broderbund, Broderbund's games were essentially Apple Galaxian, Apple Invaders. There's a Pac-Man style game, and so it's that was essentially what people were doing because there was no indication that they couldn't do it. And so Jordan was yeah, I can recreate Asteroids. So he goes to the arcade, he plays a lot of Asteroids, as Francis said. Then he comes back home on his Apple II and he does a pretty passable, rendition of Asteroids. And this did not get published because the publisher did either get cold feet or possibly did just get a cease and desist letter from Atari saying don't do clones of our games. And so they did not publish this, but we do actually have it in here as a playable, and you can play Jordan's version of Asteroid Blaster, which is what they were going to retitle it Asteroid Blaster. This is, by the way, this is watch mode. The idea behind this is, for all of the games in the Making of Karateka, you don't have to develop an expertise in them in order to be able to experience the interactive documentary. So if you do not wish to play these games, you can simply watch a playthrough of them. I think this is going to be great for if in my wildest dreams, if people are teaching classes on video game history and they want to use this as a teaching tool in place of a textbook, they can do it that way. And so, if you pause the games, you have all kinds of options. There's fewer options in the Asteroids games, and there's more in the Karateka releases later on because we did a little bit more, work on those. But we do have watch mode implemented. I am running, how are we on time? We're at 1:24. Yeah. So later on in the stream, actually probably in 6 minutes or so, we're going to be joined by at least Jeremy Williams is going to come down, and Micah might also come down, talk about some of the remastered stuff. So basically, yeah, you can spend as little or as much time as you want going through these timelines and learning about the story. You get to chapter 2. This is where we get into the inspiration for Karateka itself. Where Jordan got to here. Let me show you this. So we have hundreds of pages of Jordan's paper design documents. That we have nice high-res scans of that are all implemented here. Here's the first Karateka design document, as far as we can tell. This is from 1982, and this was when Karateka was going to be a one-on-one martial arts simulator, which would have been very interesting because there weren't a whole lot of versus multiplayer games at all for personal computers because generally it was sort of a solo sit in front of your keyboard by yourself kind of experience. And eventually, pretty quickly actually, he decided that he wanted to go in the direction of he wanted to do a cinematic sort of movie type game. But there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of here's the first storyboard where he was this is my concept for my movie style game. Setting, ancient Japan, you are a karateka, mission, get past the black belts, da-da-da-da-da. You can spend, again, hours in here, looking at all of this stuff. And once we get into chapter 3, this is where, Jordan decides that he really needs to, he wants this lifelike animation, and it's his father Francis who suggests that the animators from back in the day, Disney animators, guys like Max Fleischer here, that they had used a technique known as rotoscoping, in which you film a live actor and then you trace the frames essentially, and then you create animations based on that. Now, you might have a question of how did Jordan actually get that into the computer? And the answer to that is this. It's called a Versa writer. And this was a very, very early piece of machinery that would connect to an Apple II. And what you'd do is you'd take the drawing that you wanted to digitize, you'd put it on the board, and then that was a mechanical stylus arm. And you moved that along the contours of your drawing, and the movements of the mechanical arm would then translate into digital data. And you would end up with essentially rough sprites that would kind of look like this. And Jordan then had to redraw over these, but these rough sprites were, they essentially, when you ran them, it would look enough like realistic animation. And this was a very laborious process that Jordan had to go through. And so we show you, we can watch the Super 8 film footage of Jordan's dad running around. And then we went ahead and we were able to find the actual frames that were used in the game. And then we have another interactive element, which is called the Rotoscope Theater, in which you can look at those frames, and you can look at the tracing paper that Jordan drew on, and then you can look at the rough sprites, and you can see for yourself how what you see in the game actually corresponds to what was happening in real life. And this is something that we really wanted to do, to let you get hands-on in your own time, as much time as you want to spend, going through and observing how that process worked. And there's lots and lots of stuff. I mean, this is a design document about the Jordan's original concept for the encounter with Princess Mariko towards the end of the game. It's really, really fascinating stuff. And if you're already a big Karateka fan, you're gonna love this stuff. And if you're not already a big Karateka fan, I think by going through this, we're gonna make you a big Karateka fan, and this stuff is gonna be more impactful for you. I am joined now, as you may see, by Jeremy Williams, immediately to my left, and immediately to his left, Dave Reese. And Jeremy and Dave, you guys are the creators of one of the remastered games that is in the Making of Karateka, and it is Death Bounce Rebounded.
That's right. Hi, Chris. Hi,
Hello.
Internet.
Real world.
Yeah, this was actually the first project we were tasked with when we arrived at the company. We were introduced to the concept of Death Bounce, which of course we'd never heard of, and we were told, give it a shot. We're reimagining Karateka, see what you can do with Death Bounce. And so we hopped in here, and this is how we got to know our game engine, and we had a blast. I maintain this is the coolest first project ever assigned to anybody in the history of the industry.
So yeah, well, I'm going to jump right in here. So basically, we did not yet look at original Death Bounce, but original Death Bounce, we took a look at some of Jordan's Asteroids game, and the concept behind the original Death Bounce game, which actually,
Can we just hit the replay?
Yeah,
exactly. Let it play for a second.
Yeah. I'll go to the latest prototype because this is essentially what it's based on. So we have, just to let you guys know, there were 4 prototypes of Death Bounce that Jordan finished, and essentially he was submitting these to Broderbund. And Broderbund was making pretty significant requests for changes. And so once we get to the final version, and again, yeah, we can just use watch mode, this allows me to show off another feature of watch mode, which is chapter select. So for games like Karateka, or in this case, the final Death Bounce prototype that can be split into certain parts, we've gone ahead and done that with our watch mode playthroughs, and so you can watch it being played here. You see, so basically what's going on is, you're flying around asteroid style, and then your shots and enemies will all rebound off of the walls, and in fact, so will you. It is really, really difficult to get your stupid ship through these holes. It is so hard.
An unreleased game, mind you. This is a game that Jordan was prototyping and sent off to Broderbund and was hoping to get published, but this actually never saw the light of day. Mm-hmm. And it was Jordan learning his assembly chops.
Yeah, and Jordan had lost it too until about 10 years ago when a bunch of guys, Jason Scott, Tony Diaz, people from the Internet Archive, 10 years ago went and got all the data off of his floppy disks. And the other good part is that we've made a lot of. I mean, you can't play the original Death Bounce prototypes with a joystick. So as I was saying, chapter select, boop 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 boop, skip around, jump stages. I'm not going to show you what's at the end of the game. You'll have to find that out for yourself. So then you guys went ahead and created Death Bounce Rebounded.
Right, so like the original game, or actually I should say like Karateka, the remaster that Mike made, we used the same resolution, although a widescreen variant of the original game. So it is as pixel perfect as we could make it, and still support widescreen. So Dave, you worked on the cutscenes and the whole intro sequence. You want to talk about that?
I definitely wanted to. As you can see, the train itself and the way the ship looks really took those directly from the original game. Wanted to keep that as close to the original as possible.
Yeah.
A lot easier to get in the hole.
Yeah. Well,
the hallways between corridors, because it's a twin stick now.
Well, that's the thing.
So now it's sort of absolute. It just goes where I'm pointing it.
It didn't begin life that way. We started with the same controls that Jordan had implemented. And somewhere along the way, it just felt like worth trying. And so we implemented twin stick. And we weren't sure if we were crossing the line between respect of the original versus, user friendliness. But so we offer both options. You can play either way you want. However, twin stick feels right at home on a gamepad for obvious reasons. And in many respects, I feel like this genre evolved to become twin stick. The whole asteroids genre, you pretty much got to Geometry Wars and was like, okay, this is amazing. And so we implemented the same controls here, and it feels good.
And I think it is respectful to the original, because ultimately what we're trying to do when we do these remasters is to take the core fun of the original and present it in a way that modern players can just sort of jump into and feel like they're getting the same sort of exhilaration that somebody would have gotten if they played the original back in the 80s.
Right.
Because these games, they video games sometimes don't age well, and it's like you have to. It's hard to understand how something could have really blown somebody's mind back in the 80s. And for Death Bounce, we don't really have that. I mean, for Karateka, we can talk to John Tobias and we can talk to Tom Hall, and we can ask them, what was it like to play Karateka back in the day? But because nobody played Death Bounce back in the day, we can't really ask them that question.
That's right. And because it wasn't a finished game either, we don't even have the game necessarily to trust for where would Jordan have ended up. For instance, when you come into a new level, people, as you evolve, as you get through the trains, and the trains become more and more difficult, the cars do, they become more and more populated, and so people were dying right when they entered the car.
Right.
This is definitely a problem that Jordan would have hit eventually.
Yeah.
But we, actually, I think it was Tom Russo who suggested, why don't you just make yourself invulnerable for a period of time?
Yep. Yep.
And that became a more exciting way to charge into the room, so that you can actually rack up bonus points as you're invincible. You get these, the more enemies that you kill in that state, the more points you get.
One thing that we did have was all of Jordan's notes.
Yeah.
That described various parts of the game, including some enemies, even with some drawings of some of those enemies, some sketches. So we were able to, go in and actually make those happen.
And so we have enemies here like the Sparkle and the Twinkle that are described in the digital manual. That is not, you did not make that up. That is, those are names of potential enemies that Jordan talked about in his journals.
That's right. Yeah, and we don't even quite know what they would have looked like, but those are words that he used, and we used the hints that he gave about how they might affect the player to inform the gameplay.
So I do want to play some Karateka. There's 3 versions of Karateka that are included here, 3 retail versions, and these are sort of considered like the holy trinity of versions of Karateka. There's the Apple II. This is Jordan's original version that he created mostly on his own, and then with a bunch of assists from Broderbund as he took it to completion in '84. And then the Commodore 64 version and the Atari 8-bit version. These were created by Veda Cook. She was a programmer that worked at Broderbund, and essentially these were done by Veda under Jordan's sort of direct supervision and to his exacting standards. And that is why both of these are so good. The Commodore 64 version, they actually went back to the well on this one because the Commodore 64 actually did have sound hardware, unlike the Apple II. And in fact, Broderbund even had a piece of software called the Music Shop, which let anybody go in and compose or lay out music that could be spit out as a file and then integrated back into the game. So Jordan and Francis were using the Music Shop to create a really, really, truly leveled up version of the Karateka soundtrack that you can hear in this version. So that's why this version is considered to be, and superior to the Apple version in that respect. And then additionally, the Commodore 64 around the world, and the Atari really, were very, very popular platforms outside the US. And so for a worldwide audience, the Commodore 64 or the Atari versions are the ones that they likely remember playing from back in the day. So we do represent those 3 major versions. But we'll jump into Jordan's. And so We'll do watch mode. So this has chapter select, which by the way, watch mode is like watch and play mode because it's an emulated playthrough. You can jump in at any point and you can start playing.
Take over.
So you can use this exactly as a way to practice. If you want to practice fighting that bird, you can jump right to the bird. Here's the bird combat, and you can jump in and you can practice this until you get it right. I think people were saying in chat, always punch the bird. I kicked the birds in these ones, but that's probably because I had rewind and I could just do it perfectly and rewind if I didn't have to. But so here's the thing, I'll jump back to the beginning because the last very cool thing about watch and play mode for the Apple II version only is the commentary. And once we had this playthrough done, we sat down with Jordan and we sat down with his father Francis, and we had them record
I'm Jordan Mechner, the author and first programmer of
director's commentary based on what they were seeing.
I'm Mechner, Jordan's father and the composer of the music.
It's a good line from Francis right at the beginning here.
Yeah, this is the fastest scrolling that I could manage on the Apple II. The Apple II didn't have things like scrolling built in, so we actually had to copy each line of pixels, erase it, and then redraw it one line higher and try to make that look smooth.
I remember the first time reading that, I realized that this game was going to be a success.
Yeah, what's fascinating about this commentary when you listen through it is just that so many things came up that didn't come up in the research, that weren't in Jordan's journals or weren't otherwise stated about this game, and only because the two of them were there watching it take place in real time, did they start bringing up these memories. And by that, obviously it was the final piece of content that we were able to put in because it had to be done after that playthrough was finished, which meant the emulation had to be perfect, for us to be able to get that playthrough and know that it wasn't going to change. So
yeah, that commentary track would have been like they stand out extra feature on a DVD.
Yeah,
and it's almost buried in this product. I think when people find that, they're gonna love it because it is so much content.
It is. Yeah, and we just want to hit you at all times with that context. Like we know that some people are gonna just be like, I just want to play Karateka, and so hopefully when they jump in to play, they'll see the commentary mode and maybe they'll try that out. You do have to watch it to, you don't get commentary as you play, unfortunately. But hopefully they will anticipate, they will get that hands-on with that, and then maybe that'll send them back to say, okay, you know what, maybe I do want to read through this whole story. So at all points we want to be hitting you with that context. You're coming in?
I'm coming in.
All right. All right. Well, somebody's got to go. Is Jeremy? Who's going to step out? Everybody? All right. We have one more special guest for you before we finish up the live stream. I'm sure you know who it is.
I don't.
I also brought down, before we get into this, I don't think we're going to discuss this much, but when I was up in Mike's office stealing his copy of Karateka, I also stole his copy of Choplifter, which turned out to be sealed. A beautiful, sealed, mint condition, not in a box protector or even a baggie or anything, version of Dan Gorlin's Choplifter. And I brought this down because, as you will learn in the documentary, The Making of Karateka, coming out tomorrow, Choplifter, if there was one video game that really inspired Karateka, it was actually Choplifter. And why is that? I don't know. You'll just have to, play Karateka, Making of Karateka, and find out why that is. Hi, Mike. Look,
Hello.
It's Digital Eclipse Studio President Mike Micah, everybody. Welcome, Mike, to the stream. Hello. So, Mike, you are here for the final portion of the Karateka festivities today because you created Karateka Remastered.
That's right. And it was an absolutely terrifying job to take on because Karateka is one of my favorite games of all time. Jordan, one of my game development heroes. Mm-hmm. And so doing this sounded fun at first, but then you're going through it and you're like, oh, why did I do this? But there's a good reason to do it.
Right, because what you really wanted to do was, you've played a lot of versions of Karateka,
yeah.
right? Karateka is one of your top games of all time.
Yep.
And you've played a lot of versions of it, and you've discovered that so many of them, which are not in this compilation, were pretty bad.
Yeah, it was really intriguing to me because I couldn't understand why the other versions would deviate so much from something that was so good. And it's like, why would you choose not to do that? And there was also a long time ago, I wanted a version for the Commodore Amiga that never existed. And so when I was in high school, I tried making a version of Karateka for the Commodore Amiga, and I got only so far, so I realized it was pretty difficult. So for this, there was an opportunity to kind of get that done, finally finish a version of Karateka, but also use it as a way to understand where the challenges actually were in the porting of the game.
This is generally what Mike does when we do something like this, which is like, oh, sweet, I get to make my own version. You know, whether it's rock and roll racing or Karateka, it's like, oh, dang.
That's the only reason I do this job. I just want to do this stuff for the rest of my life.
So one of the big things. So first of all, I mean, we'll just sort of jump right in, and the idea is you're using the original sprites. So we're not losing the original sort of motion captured, animation. But at the same time, clearly we've got this beautiful glowy torch on the wall. You're upscaling the experience, but only to the extent of like this. It's almost like a VGA IBM game.
That was it. Yeah, I didn't want to just make a modern version of Karateka. One already exists. What I wanted to do was kind of what happened with Prince of Persia. There was an Apple II version of Prince of Persia that was amazing for Apple II, but then the PC and Mac and Amiga versions were just so much more colorful and just better in so many ways, but it was still very much Jordan's work, and you could feel it. So I was just wanting to create something that would be the same thing. So the resolution, while the same as the Apple II, it's widescreen, so we've extended it out. And all the keyframes from Karateka are in here, but colorized with more color. And then we have some hand-tweened frames that make up the smoothness of some of this animation you see here too.
So you just saw the nothing personal text that popped up, and that's a goal. So that is we've implemented various goals and things like that to make sure that as you're doing multiple playthroughs of Karateka Remastered, you're rewarded for trying different things, accomplishing cool things. It's smoother, right? It's more sort of along the lines of the responsiveness that modern day players would expect. It's got, there we go. It's just got our first Steam achievement there. But the important thing is you've also got this wonderful system of commentary. And what's the idea behind this?
So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. The idea that there's all these challenges in porting the game. And as I was doing this, I was just keeping track of what those challenges were, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to share in something about the making of Karateka, the making of the remaster of Karateka. So what I've here is you can hear it right now.
PC remaster. That's already been done. There was already another Karateka that was kind of a modern take on Karateka. My fascination sat with the idea that I wanted to figure out what the obstacles were to people who were porting the game, and try to understand why that was so challenging. Because I think when you first look at Karateka, on its surface, you're like, all right, one-on-one combat, very simple mechanics, that should be easy to do. But it really isn't. And when you start digging into Jordan's code, you start to realize he had created basically the perfect clockwork version of a fighting game that was very cinematic, but on top of that, he had spent a couple years really optimizing everything to just work perfectly. If you just move one byte this way or one byte that way, the game breaks. And it was like the ultimate optimization. For me, to approach this then and try to port it.
So that and that was kind of one of the reasons why you realized, oh, all these other ports are bad because the original is so finely tuned and optimized that you can't just go in there and recreate it without really having a deep understanding of what Jordan was doing. And then even if you had that understanding, it doesn't necessarily mean, we're not talking about like the Xbox versus the PS4. Like we're talking about wildly different hardware systems that display graphics in very different ways that just function.
And at that time, people weren't necessarily porting with source code because the source code wasn't really commented very well. It's very hard to read and understand. And at that time, people would just make versions by just watching it and be like, oh, I'll make that. But this was such a unique and new thing that it was really hard to bring that experience over without the source code.
So yeah, I mean that's so Karateka Remastered. I think one of the other very important things that we should note let's actually we'll show a little bit more of the big cat because so one of the things that we found out in the process of creating the Making of Karateka is that originally Jordan wanted to, and Broderbund wanted to put in another enemy that did not make the game, and it was Akuma has his bird, and he was also going to have a big cat, which was sort of alternately called a leopard or a panther or what. And so we recovered off of Jordan's floppy disks some of the animations. Oh, hilarious thing! Did you see? Somebody responded on Twitter when we showed this, and they were like, "Oh yeah, that's in Broderbund's Animate software." Like, what? And linked to a page on archive.org that Broderbund in '86 did a piece of software for Apple II called Animate, and it had a bunch of animations in it, and this one was in there.
It makes
sense.
So
they used it. It makes total sense because they had it. They didn't use it for anything, but none of us knew that and had no reason to go digging in Broderbund's Animate software to see. And now I don't know if this was in there. I don't know if we've shown this before. Here's the cat eating God knows what. I don't know if this animation made it in there, but we threw it in there as a video too, so you can see how that animation would have played out in the game. They never got as far as implementing this, but what you did in Karateka Remastered is you implemented the cat fight, but because it was never designed, like, you had to essentially come up with something totally new.
And I tried doing that by looking at the evolution from Karateka to Prince of Persia and the kind of puzzles and the kind of things that were there, because there had to be something more than just confronting the leopard. So when you play the game, you'll see it's a nice little puzzle, a little bit different from the rest of the stuff in Karateka, yet still similar. Mm-hmm. But it has a little bit of a callback to Prince of Persia as well.
And speaking of the cat, Jordan is obviously the author of Karateka. He's the original programmer of Karateka. But when the game got signed, so first of all, so this is what we have in here this is Jordan's original prototype of Karateka. This is what he. Oops, what did I just do? I hit X instead of Y. And so basically, Jordan had his version of Karateka that he did basically by himself with his dad doing music, and he submitted that to Broderbund. And Broderbund is like, "This is great. This is totally publishable, but we want it to be 3 times as long." And so Jordan headed to Broderbund during one of his summer vacations from Yale, and went and worked out of the Broderbund office. And he worked primarily with these guys on the design. It's Gene Portwood and Lauren Elliott. And we really wanted to make sure that we gave these guys their due, especially because Gene Portwood actually passed away in 2000. But he was a Disney animator, and so he brought that knowledge of like Disney animation. And the thing is, I was talking about Choplifter. Gene actually worked on this too, like giving Choplifter a little bit of an animated feel and a story type approach. And so Gene Portwood is another like major unsung hero, I think, of video game history, for the influence and the direct work that he did on those early Broderbund games, because as a Disney guy, he was coming in and saying, he wasn't a video game designer, he was a Disney animator, but he was like, let's really make these games. Let's give them animation and a human quality and use them to tell stories. And so he really saw what the potential was there. Lauren Elliott, fortunately, still alive, healthy, and with us, and appears in several of the video segments in the Making of Karateka. Gave us a lot of that behind the scenes story of Broderbund as well, and he was the one who did the animation on the big cat. And so we want to make sure that everybody kind of gets their due, the people who worked on these games and what was their role, because even something like no video game is created by one person, and there's this tendency to ascribe even older games like this to a single creator, but everything is a team effort. And to see this is a game that had an auteur, absolutely, but we talk about the support structure around that auteur, right?
I mean, that was just it, because this whole story really isn't just about Jordan. It's about that support structure and how important that was to make this happen. And honestly, it's a great human story. I'm sure you covered this earlier, but I hope that when people pick this up, it isn't really just to play Karateka, as we all know. We just want people to understand how this came to be, but also the human side of game development.
Mm-hmm. Somebody was asking, do we have a nice version of the original box art? Yes, there it is. You can see the untouched box art. We found out in the process of making this that signature. That's Thomas Blackshear II. That's the artist who did it. We've got also in here the great once Karateka gets released, we have the fan letter that was written by a young teenager named John Romero to a young 20-year-old.
I wonder
Jordan
if he ever
Mechner.
amounted to anything.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we might maybe we'll hear from him again one day, and we can read the fan letter, and then another amazing fan project. This is incredible. I'm so glad we got this in here. This was also something we're talking about, things, games getting passed around person to person on floppy disks. This was a viral meme that before anything. This guy named Eric Newman created a fan movie pseudo sequel to Karateka
that plays on an Apple II.
That plays on
a machinima of its first kind.
Yes, right? Exactly. And so you don't control it. It literally is just a movie file. But basically, it's this parody of Karateka it's ultra violent. In fact, there may be some ultra violence coming up right now. Yeah. And again we have a commentary track from Eric.
The name Karateka Wrath of Dude actually came from the Star Trek movie Wrath of Khan.
No. And again, this was passed around floppy disk to floppy disk to floppy disk to the point that nobody really knew who had created it, or was it an official sequel?
And it was even in Jordan's archives. It was his own personal floppy.
Yes.
collection.
Yeah. So we were able to confirm for Eric, who we got in touch with, that yes, this did make it to Jordan. Yeah, Jordan did see this back in the day. And so we get into the creation of the Atari versions and things like that. We talked to Veda Cook in one of the videos about the porting process and how difficult it was, and get into some other, representing other versions like the PC-88 version, which is hilarious because whatever anonymous Japanese developer created this, they just wrote the word Fuji on top of Mount Fuji because I think they looked at this as, wow, what a weird pastiche of what a teenager from the 1980s thinks Japan is like, and they leaned into that sort of ridiculousness a little bit. Look at that costume on Akuma in this
That's
version.
amazing.
Incredible. So then again we end with Karateka 2. This never actually happened, but we start to look at things that were recovered from Jordan's floppy disks, where it was all about what he was trying to do. And these are all fake screenshots. These are all mock-ups that he would do in order to just get a sense for himself of what that game would look like when it was finished on the screen. And that was sort of part of his design process. But he was using the Karateka characters. There's the Karateka hero and Mariko, and was trying to figure out maybe there was a game where Mariko could go swimming. I don't know. And was working on this. And as you get closer and closer to the end, it just starts to look like Prince of Persia, and this is where it stopped becoming Karateka 2 and started becoming Prince of Persia, and that's where our story ends. So again, we're coming to the end of this live stream. This has been the Making of Karateka. It is the first entry in what we are calling the Gold Master Series. And the idea behind the Gold Master Series is, looking back and championing and really bringing back games and franchises and shining a spotlight on creators and developers and really just the stories of video game history, doing it in that interactive way, and really just treating stuff like this. It would have been disrespectful to Karateka to simply get it running again and plop it on Steam without the context and the understanding of well, what is this? Why is it so revered? And so by the end of this, we hope that if you weren't a fan, then you will be a fan by the end of it, because you will really understand how impactful it was to video game history. And if you are a fan, it's got, I can't imagine, delivering a better, revival of the game than this. And there's so much we have not gotten into.
Yeah.
There's so much that's been done to those original games as well. So many options that you can tweak that we just don't have time to get into right now. But you'll experience it for yourself. Now, we've come to the end of this live stream, and I'm sure you have one question. How much does this cost? It doesn't cost $100, although it'll be worth every penny of that. It does not cost $80 like some of you out there might be thinking, having seen this live stream. It doesn't cost $50 or $40 or even $30. Karateka, the Making of Karateka, can be yours for just one easy payment of $19.99. All right? So, and in fact, if it's Monday and you're watching this live, you can go to GOG.com right now.
Yes.
And we're running a pre-order special where you can get it for $14.99 if you
are
pre-order
crazy.
from GOG. I am absolutely crazy.
You're going
I'm
out of your
losing
mind.
money, Mike. I'm losing money on this deal. Making of Karateka. Take advantage of the special promotional opportunity, or don't, and just buy it on Xbox One, Xbox Series S or X, PlayStation 4,
Buy it on
PlayStation
everything,
5.
and buy it for your
everything.
friends.
Exactly. Buy one copy of every version. Buy several copies. They make the Making of Karateka makes an excellent Christmas gift. Hanukkah,
Anniversary gift.
Thanksgiving gift if you're in that. Exactly. Anniversary gift. Tell her you love her by giving her the Making of Karateka.
Yeah.
Every kiss begins with K
Karateka.
for Karateka. Yes, exactly. Well, thanks a lot, everybody. Thank you for being here. Drew Scanlon in the production booth
Thanks,
now.
Drew.
Thank you, Drew. Kicked off the stream with us. Thank you to Mike. Thanks to Jeremy and Dave for being here,
Yeah.
showing us Death Bounce Rebounded. Making of Karateka is absolutely packed with content. It's going to be available on Karateka Tuesday, August 29th. That is tomorrow. So we hope that you enjoy it, and we hope that we will see you playing Karateka tomorrow.
I want to see you playing Karateka. I'll be online looking for people playing Karateka.